The summer morning in June 2024 started like any other workday. I pulled into the driveway of our Willow Glen home around 8:30 a.m., earlier than usual. The repair job at the San Jose auto shop had wrapped up faster than expected, and I figured I'd surprise my wife with an early return. Peter and Jill, that's us. 9 years of marriage. 9 years that felt like a golden era until everything shattered in mere minutes. Our house sat on a quiet tree-lined street in one of San Jose's most desirable neighborhoods. The mortgage had been steep, but Jill's catering business brought in good money, and together we'd made it work. I grabbed my toolbox from the truck bed, the metal clanging softly in the morning stillness. Birds chirped overhead. A neighbor waved from across the street. Everything seemed perfectly normal. I turned my key in the lock and pushed open the front door. The house was quiet but not empty quiet. There was a presence, a warmth that suggested Jill was home. She often returned late from catering events, sometimes not until 2 or 3 in the morning, so finding her home mid-morning wasn't unusual. I set my toolbox down in the hallway, kicked off my work boots and started toward the living room. That's when I heard her voice. "Yes, baby, I'm waiting for you to pick me up. Peter will definitely be at work for another 3 hours." I froze mid-step. The voice was hers, but the tone, I'd never heard that tone before. Warm, intimate, dripping with anticipation. My hand gripped the doorframe as my brain struggled to process what I was hearing. Without my knowledge, my phone had automatically connected via Bluetooth to our home speaker system. Jill was on a phone call, but her voice echoed through every room. "I love you," she said, and those words that should have belonged to me, pierced through my chest like a blade. A male voice responded, calm and confident, "And I love you even more. Can't wait for this weekend." I should have stormed in right then. Should have confronted her, demanded answers, made her face what she was doing. But I couldn't move. My legs felt like concrete. My throat had closed up. Instead, I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound, and found myself walking numbly toward our bedroom. I sat down on the edge of our bed with such force that the frame creaked. But Jill didn't hear. She kept talking, describing plans and feelings that made my chest ache with a sharp, merciless pain. I listened to my wife plan a future that didn't include me, coordinate logistics for a relationship that had apparently been going on right under my nose. The details emerged slowly, painfully. A weekend getaway. Intimate dinners. Promises of time together. Each word was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I sat there for 20 minutes, maybe 30, listening to her voice drift through the house, painting pictures of betrayal in excruciating detail. When she finally ended the call, I heard her footsteps moving toward the kitchen. I quickly stood, splashed cold water on my face in the bathroom, and forced myself to breathe normally. By the time she found me in the living room, I was sitting on the couch, staring at the television without seeing anything on the screen. "Oh, you're home early," she said, her face lighting up with surprise. "How was work?" I forced a smile. "Finished ahead of schedule. Thought I'd come back and maybe we could grab lunch." "I'd love to," she said, leaning down to kiss my cheek, "but I have to prep for tonight's event. Maybe dinner tomorrow?" "Sure," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Tomorrow sounds great." She disappeared back into the kitchen, humming softly to herself. I sat there, still staring at the television, feeling like my entire world had been turned inside out. That evening I pretended nothing was wrong. I acted like a man who had no idea his wife was in love with someone else. Jill returned home around 9 that night, carrying flowers and wearing a smile that seemed to glow from something that had nothing to do with me. She talked about the event, about the clients, about how exhausting but rewarding her work was. I nodded in all the right places, made appropriate sounds of interest, played my role perfectly. Inside I was dying. The next day brought a name, David. I heard her mention it during a phone call with her sister. She thought I was in the garage working on a project, but I'd come back inside for a glass of water and caught the tail end of the conversation. "David invited me to lunch at the Fairmont this weekend," she said into the phone, her voice light and happy. "He's so understanding. Peter never gives me that kind of attention anymore." The Fairmont, San Jose. Only 5 miles from our house. Close enough that she could slip away during the day, conduct her affair, and return home before I'd notice anything amiss. The proximity made it real in a way the phone conversation hadn't. This wasn't some fantasy. This was systematic, calculated, ongoing. I started investigating, but not like a jealous husband from a bad movie. I was methodical, clinical. I reviewed our credit card statements going back months, cross-referencing dates and locations. Hotels, restaurants, expensive perfume, intimate apparel I'd never seen her wear around me. The trail went back 11 months, almost a full year of lies. Each purchase told the same story. Lunch at upscale restaurants. Afternoon bookings at boutique hotels. Charges for champagne and desserts on weekdays when she told me she was scouting venues for upcoming events. The evidence mounted, transaction by transaction, painting a picture of a double life I'd been too blind to see. What hurt most was how long it had been going on. 11 months. Nearly a year of deception. A year of her looking me in the eye every morning, kissing me goodbye, telling me she loved me while maintaining a separate relationship with someone else. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself, it was in the sustained, calculated nature of it. I had to admit, though, that our marriage hadn't been perfect. Our bedroom had become a wasteland over the past 2 years. I'd been dealing with chronic back pain from years of working under cars, often coming home exhausted and in too much pain to be the husband she needed. We'd become roommates sharing a house rather than partners sharing a life. We dressed and undressed together, ate meals at the same table, slept in the same bed, but we weren't really living together anymore. But understanding doesn't equal forgiveness. It doesn't excuse betrayal. It doesn't make the pain any less real. I confided in my brother Paul first. He's one of the most level-headed people I know, and I needed someone to help me think clearly through the rage and hurt. My sister Chelsea had been through a divorce about 10 years ago, so she understood the legal complexities. And I retained an attorney named Margaret, recommended by Leon, a colleague from the shop who'd gone through his own divorce battle. They all gave me the same advice: document everything, don't rush, and don't act out of anger. Revenge served cold, they said, is far more effective than hot rage. I recorded the conversation I'd accidentally overheard through the speaker system. I saved every credit card statement. I photographed receipts. I became an archaeologist of my own betrayal, excavating layer after layer of lies and deception. Meeting with Margaret was eye-opening. She reviewed everything with a practiced, professional eye, taking notes, asking pointed questions, building a case. Under California law, she explained, evidence of infidelity could influence asset division, especially when marital funds had been used to finance the affair. Our house in Willow Glen was worth approximately $950,000. It had been purchased primarily with bonuses from Jill's catering business, but the title was in both our names. My salary as an auto mechanic, $40,000 a year, obviously couldn't have afforded such a property alone. But in divorce proceedings, that distinction mattered less than the evidence of wrongdoing. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click like if you enjoy this story. I always read your comments and analyze which stories you like best so that I can create better stories. Thank you. I will continue the story. I didn't trust the narrative that divorces could be amicable, not when betrayal ran this deep. I knew that once I revealed what I knew, Jill would either leave David and try to salvage our marriage, or she'd fight me tooth and nail in court. There was no third option. There was no scenario where everyone walked away intact. But before I filed for divorce, I decided David needed to understand there were consequences for his actions. Not just emotional consequences, real, tangible ones that would affect his life the way his actions had devastated mine. David worked as a hotel manager and his reputation was his kingdom. I knew from Jill's conversations that he took pride in his professional standing, his network of contacts, his position within the hospitality industry. I decided that's where I'd strike first. I started by researching the Fairmont San Jose's corporate structure. I found out who the general manager was, who the regional director was, and who handled human resources. I learned that hotels take professional conduct extremely seriously, especially when it involves relationships with vendors or service providers. I created an anonymous email address designed to look like it came from a hospitality industry ethics organization. I crafted a detailed complaint about unprofessional conduct between a manager and a service vendor, being careful not to name Jill specifically but providing enough details, dates, the hotel name, the nature of the relationship, to make it clear this was a pattern of behavior rather than a one-time incident. I sent similar reports to professional forums for hotel managers, framing my complaints in terms of business ethics rather than personal grievances. I described his inappropriate relationships with business partners, and how such behavior compromises professional integrity. I was careful never to write anything that could be considered legally actionable slander. Everything was framed as concern about professional standards. I also reached out to my sister Chelsea, explaining what I needed. She had a wide social network in San Jose's business community, and I asked her to start spreading word, not from me directly but as rumor, that Jill and I were separating. Not the specifics of why, just the fact of the separation itself. Rumors, I'd learned, travel faster than truth, especially in the interconnected world of Bay Area professionals. Within 2 days, I heard through my network that David had been placed on administrative leave from the Fairmont. The official reason was pending investigation into professional conduct. His photo began appearing on professional forums with warnings about his questionable business practices. Only then did I file for divorce. The court process took 3 months, but Margaret had prepared thoroughly. She presented the judge with every piece of evidence: the recorded conversation, the credit card statements, the timeline of hotel stays and restaurant visits. She demonstrated that Jill had used marital funds to finance an 11-month affair, spending thousands of dollars that should have been joint assets. The judge reviewed everything methodically. He listened to the audio recording, studied the financial documents, and noted the geographic proximity between our home and the Fairmont, which made regular afternoon meetings entirely plausible. His face remained neutral throughout, but I could see the wheels turning as he processed the evidence. When he issued his ruling, it was decisive. He found Jill had committed marital misconduct. He awarded me 70% of our marital assets. The house became mine. Most of our savings accounts became mine. Our retirement funds were split heavily in my favor. Jill was left with 30%, which amounted to about $900,000 in cash after everything was liquidated. It was still a substantial amount, but it wasn't the house she'd loved, wasn't the life she'd built. But the financial judgment was just the beginning. The real consequences were unfolding outside the courtroom. Jill lost her position with the hotel catering. David had been fired, and once their relationship became public knowledge, which it did rapidly, through the interconnected grapevine of Bay Area hospitality professionals, they tried to continue their relationship openly. But something fundamental had shifted. Jill's clients began canceling contracts. Word had spread through the networks of wealthy Silicon Valley executives and socialites who'd used her catering services. They didn't want their important events associated with someone embroiled in scandal. They didn't want to risk the awkwardness of having a caterer whose personal drama might overshadow their carefully planned gatherings. David, meanwhile, couldn't find work anywhere in San Jose's hotel industry. The reviews and complaints I'd seeded followed him like a shadow. Every time a potential employer searched his name, they found questions about his professional ethics, concerns about his relationships with vendors, warnings from other industry professionals. No hotel wanted to take on a manager with that kind of baggage. I watched from a distance as their relationship deteriorated under pressure. David became resentful, blaming Jill for costing him his career. Jill blamed him for not protecting her from the consequences. They fought constantly, their romance unable to survive in the harsh light of reality, without the excitement and secrecy that had sustained it. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, they broke up. David moved to Phoenix to try starting over somewhere his reputation hadn't been destroyed. Jill stayed in San Jose, but not as the successful private event caterer she'd been. She found work in a regular restaurant kitchen, making $38,000 a year. The elevated position she'd built over years of hard work had crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. As for me, I sold the house at a profit and bought a smaller, newer place in an even better part of Willow Glen. I invested $25,000 in bearer bonds as a safety net. I'd become a calculating person, someone who thought 3 steps ahead, who protected himself first. But I wasn't happy. I'd won by any objective measure, but victory felt hollow. Paul noticed. He came to visit my new place one Saturday, admired the modern kitchen and the upgraded appliances, then asked me point blank, "Peter, are you happier now?" I couldn't answer him directly. Because the answer was complicated, built on 9 years of history, on hurt buried deep in my chest, on a woman I'd once loved and now hated with an intensity that surprised even me. And that hate, that victory, that successful revenge, none of it led to happiness. It led to emptiness. The truth was, I'd destroyed Jill's life as thoroughly as she destroyed our marriage. I'd systematically dismantled her career, her social standing, her relationship with David, her financial security. I'd done it methodically, coldly, effectively. And now I sat in my new house, surrounded by the spoils of my victory, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Late at night, when the house was silent and I couldn't sleep, I sometimes wondered if there had been another way. Could we have talked? Could we have tried therapy? Could I have fought for our marriage instead of destroying everything she'd built? But then I'd remember her voice on that phone call, the warmth and intimacy she'd given to David, the 11 months of lies, and the anger would return. My sister Chelsea understood, in her way. She'd been through her own divorce, knew the particular kind of pain that comes from betrayal. "You did what you had to do," she told me one evening over beer in my new kitchen. She made her choices. You just made sure there were consequences. But consequences and justice aren't the same as healing. They don't fill the void left when trust shatters. They don't answer the questions that plague you at 3 in the morning. Was I not enough? What did David give her that I couldn't? When did she stop loving me? Did she ever really love me at all? Margaret, my attorney, had been satisfied with the outcome. She'd won her case decisively, secured a favorable settlement for her client. But she'd also pulled me aside after the final hearing and said something that stuck with me. You got what you wanted in court. But make sure you don't spend the rest of your life in that courtroom, reliving this over and over. Easier said than done. Because every time I walked into my new house, I was reminded of what I'd lost and what I'd won. Every time I saw Jill's name on legal documents or heard gossip about her diminished circumstances, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness that I couldn't untangle. The professional community in San Jose wasn't large, especially in our overlapping circles. I heard through Leon that Jill had tried to restart her catering business but couldn't attract clients. I heard from Chelsea that she'd started dating someone new, but it hadn't worked out. I heard from a former mutual friend that she'd gained weight, looked tired, seemed defeated. Part of me felt vindicated. She'd hurt me and now she was hurting. Karma, justice, consequences, whatever you wanted to call it. But another part of me, a part one tried to ignore, felt something uncomfortably close to regret. I thought about that a lot in the months after everything settled. I'd spent so much energy on revenge, on making sure Jill and David paid for what they'd done, that I hadn't spent any energy on healing myself. I'd won the battle but lost something essential in the process. My capacity for trust had been shattered. My ability to be vulnerable had been buried under layers of anger and calculation. Paul tried to set me up on dates with friends of friends, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Every woman I met was measured against Jill, against the betrayal, against the possibility that it could all happen again. I'd built walls so high and so thick that nobody could get through, and I wasn't sure I wanted them to. One night, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I drove past our old house. The new owners had painted it a different color, installed new landscaping, made it theirs. I sat in my truck across the street, engine running, remembering the day we'd moved in. How excited we'd been. How Jill had insisted we carry each other over the threshold, laughing at the tradition of it. How we'd made love in every room before the furniture arrived, christening our new home. That version of us felt like characters in a story I'd read long ago, people I'd known but could barely remember. The man I'd been then, hopeful, trusting, in love, seemed like a stranger. The man I'd become, calculating, guarded, victorious but hollow, was someone I wasn't sure I liked. Margaret had been right. I'd gotten what I wanted. Jill had paid for her betrayal, thoroughly and completely. David had lost his career. I'd kept the house, most of the money, and my dignity. By any measure I'd won. But sitting in my truck, looking at the house that had once been ours, I realized that winning and healing were two different things. I'd achieved revenge, but I hadn't achieved peace. I destroyed what Jill had built, but I hadn't built anything new for myself. I'd proven I wasn't someone who could be betrayed without consequences, but I'd also proven I was someone capable of cold, calculated destruction. The question Paul had asked echoed in my mind: was I happier? The answer, I finally admitted to myself, was no. I wasn't happier. I was vindicated, I was financially secure, I was proven right. But I wasn't happy. The hollow feeling in my chest hadn't been filled by victory. If anything, it had grown larger, consuming more of me with each passing day. I drove away from the old house and back to my new one, thinking about the cost of revenge and wondering if I'd paid too high a price for it. Thank you for watching this video. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.